I'm Tammy Leslie Mitchell, and welcome to my kitchen. I'm here with my daughter Hannah Osborne and her husband Jacob, who is filming us, and today we're going to teach you how to bake an Epiphany cake.
So the most common Epiphany cake you guys are probably familiar with is the Mardi Gras King's cake, but there's actually a lot of variations around the world. There's French versions, Spanish versions. It was all thought to originate in the Middle Ages in Central Europe. They all have a common theme, and that is that they are intended to be round, like a king's crown, because what we're celebrating is January 6th, which is Epiphany, which is intended to represent the arrival of the wise men to see baby Jesus. So, as you all know, when the wise men showed up, they had gifts for baby Jesus, so they will hide little treasures inside. The treasures that go inside are as various as the recipes across the world. Sometimes, like in New Orleans, you'll have a baby. Some places they put beans inside, sometimes they do actual coins. We're going to be a little more child friendly and put chocolate coins in so that nobody chokes, and so there's some chocolatey goodness. When you get the slice that has the hidden chocolate inside, you're said to have good luck or be king for the day. So we're going to do a variation that is similar to a pound cake so that it's a little more palatable for everybody.
Okay, let's get started.
So the first thing to know before you get into this cake is that it really does best when all of the ingredients are about the same temperature. It allows them to combine a little bit easier. So you may have seen that this calls for an extensive amount of butter. So make sure that your butter is set out as well as your eggs and your measured out eggnog. And I would recommend letting it sit for about 30 minutes before you get started while you're measuring everything out so it can come to a room temperature.
Okay, so if your ingredients are not at room temperature when you're ready to get started, we have a couple of tricks for you. So Hannah?
So this will help speed this along. I have often gotten ready to bake and then not have my ingredients at room temperature, so I learned a few tricks. First of all, to get butter to room temperature, what you can do is you can take your stick of butter, stick it on a small plate, get a glass, and fill it up with very hot water. You can either boil water or you can fill this with water about halfway full, stick it in the microwave for a couple of minutes to where you have very hot, almost boiling water in the cup. Empty it in the sink and then cover your butter with this warm glass. And what that'll do is it'll allow the butter to slowly soften without melting. And you can just repeat that with all 3 sticks of butter that go into this recipe. Similarly with eggs, another trick you can do to bring them to room temperature is to get very hot water, not necessarily boiling because you don't want to hard boil the eggs, but if you get very warm water, put the eggs in the water for about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, they will come to room temperature.
Okay, now that we have all our ingredients at room temperature, we're ready to get started. I think the first thing is to preheat the oven. Is that right?
Yes, 325 degrees.
Okay, let me do that.
Okay. Second step is going to be to prepare your tin. Now, as we mentioned at the beginning, the traditional shape of a king's cake is meant to be round, so you can mimic a crown of a king. We are going to be using a bundt cake and bundt cake tin, and one of the things I want to emphasize for you guys about a bundt cake tin, as you may be familiar, there's a lot of crevices, so it's very important to make sure if you're going to be using a tin like this that you really grease it well. We have a little secret trick for preparing our tin, which is in the ingredients in the recipe that you received. Traditionally, people prepare a tin by greasing it and then putting flour on it. For a bundt tin, you're going to be displaying this cake just as it comes out of the tin, and it's generally a naked cake, so you don't have frosting to hide any sticky bits. So what we have here is a batter that's going to grease the pan, and this is a mixture of shortening, oil, and flour. And it's very easy to mix up. It's just equal parts of those 3 ingredients, and you're going to use a paintbrush or pastry brush if you have it. If you don't have a pastry brush, you can use a paper towel or your fingers if you really want to get in there. And all you got to do is just take your tin and get a little bit of this on here and brush it through. I'm not going to show you every crevice because that'll take a little while. This is another thing you can do while you're waiting for your ingredients to get to room temperature. All right, now that we've got our tin successfully prepared, we're just gonna set this aside and get started on the preparation of the cake.
First, we're gonna mix our dry ingredients. We have flour, we have baking powder, and we have salt. Okay, so we're gonna mix them together in a medium bowl. And then we're gonna use a whisk to make sure that they're evenly distributed.
Okay, now that we have our dry ingredients ready to go, we are going to move on to creaming our butter and sugar together. So the version of the King's Cake we're making is a traditional pound cake, which gets its name because you have a pound of 4 major ingredients: butter, flour, sugar, and eggs. So we are going to be creaming 3 whole sticks of butter with 2 types of sugar. We're going to be using granulated sugar and brown sugar for a little extra flavor. So at this point, you really need to make sure that your butter is at room temperature so that it is able to be creamed easily. If your butter is still cold to the touch, or if you find that it's very firm, be sure to use that trick I showed you at the beginning of the video to soften your butter under the glass, or just give it a little more time. So we'll go ahead and start by unwrapping these butters. When you're looking for softened butter, you definitely don't want it to be liquefied. You want it to just be soft but still solid. Okay, so what we'll do here is we're going to start this mixer.
Okay.
And now we're gonna, can you turn that off for a second? We're gonna add the incorporation of the sugar actually helps the butter move around a little bit better. So we've got 1.5 cups of brown sugar, and we're adding a cup of granulated sugar in here as well. All right, now go ahead and turn that on.
And we're using about a medium speed to do this.
Okay, you're gonna know that your creaming is finished when the ingredients are sort of all uniformly combined, and the texture should be something like peanut butter. Okay, after your sugars and butter are creamed, this is where you're gonna add your room temperature eggs one at a time.
And you're gonna wanna mix these on a slow speed so they don't explode all over the room.
Now what I'm doing here is I'm actually cracking the egg into a bowl before I put it into the mixer. This is important because 1, you're going to avoid getting any accidental shells into the mix, and 2, you can check and see if the egg is good. Add that in one at a time. And then what my mom is going to do here is she's just going to kind of keep this mixer moving so that the egg is fully incorporated before we add another one. Okay, now that we have all of our eggs fully incorporated into the batter, next we're going to add the dry ingredients and the eggnog. We're going to do this slowly, about 1/3 at a time, and we're going to alternate between dry ingredients and eggnog for a smoother texture overall. Okay, so stir this up one more time. And then I'm just using a cup measure. You can use 1/3 of a cup if you want, and fill it about halfway, 2/3 of the way full.
And again, you're going to want to use a slow speed so you don't have it all over the kitchen.
When I'm adding the alternate between the dry and the wet ingredients, I usually just look at the batter and wait until I don't see any more white bits to know that the flour is fully incorporated before adding more liquid. Okay, so we have our beautiful batter here ready to go, and our greased bundt tin ready for action. One thing about the bundt tin, before you pour the batter in, just make sure you've truly got every crevice of it filled with the non-stick substance, and make sure you fill it all the way to the top here, because even when you pour the dough in, or the batter rather, it's not going to go all the way up to the top initially. You're only going to fill it about 2/3 of the way full, till about right here. But as it's in the oven, it's going to rise and fill up the whole tin. So make sure you get the middle part completely covered as well as the edges. Mom is going to use a measuring cup to spoon it in to help measure it out. With a batter this thick, it's tempting to try and turn the bowl, but you definitely don't want to have it all come out in one clump. And while she's filling that, this recipe is going to be a little bit different for everybody baking at home, depending on the size of your pan. So just know, if you're using a bundt tin, you always want to fill it about 2/3, and you may or may not have leftover batter. So what we've done is we have this extra tin here prepared on the side. If we have leftover batter, I'm not one to let any sweets go to waste. So we're gonna make basically some little triangles out of it.
This really is a pound cake because it feels like I'm putting a pound in at a time. It's actually bending the handle of the measuring cup.
Okay, we have our 2/3 full bundt tin, and now we're going to put this in the oven for about an hour to bake at 325. We've already preheated
Set a rack.
Try to put it in the middle of the oven. Everybody's ovens are a little different. Some have hot spots, so try to just go for the middle. And we're gonna let that bake for about an hour. Okay, so now we're gonna do an optional activity. Our cake is baking. This is what we're gonna do in the meantime. One of the decorations that's traditional with king's cake is to make some stars, which fits with the story. They followed the stars to see the baby Jesus. So in your recipe, you'll see that we called for white chocolate chips and dark chocolate chips. If you have a preference for one chocolate or the other, you can choose one or the other. We're going to show you how to make both. We just have these chips from Kroger, the Toll House, the little chips will do just fine. We've measured out about a 1/2 cup of each in these bowls. And what we're going to do is we are going to temper the chocolate, which just sounds really fancy and complicated, but really all you're doing is microwaving it for 30-second intervals. Chocolate, when it has changes in temperatures, it creates a really glossy shine and makes it really easy to work with. So we're going to try to replicate that in the microwave for 30-second intervals. And then we're going to pipe it into star shapes. Now, not everybody has pastry kits at home, so fortunately, Ziploc bags will do the trick. Once this is liquefied and tempered from the microwave, what we're going to do is we're just going to pour it into these Ziploc baggies, and then we're going to cut a tiny corner of it and hold it like a piping bag and pipe shapes with it. So we'll get started and show you how to do that.
Our eyes at last shall see him through his own redeemed.
Okay, so what we've done is we tempered the chocolate in the microwave and we poured some of it into a Ziploc baggie here. We're making a makeshift pastry bag. And all you're gonna do is you're gonna take the corner of your pastry bag and cut a corner of it so that you've got a little hole on the end.
Tiny.
And now the last part, it's important to use wax paper because once these have hardened, we want them to be able to come up. So Jacob, if you can come closer and shoot what we're gonna be doing with this. You pipe star shapes. So what we'll do is we'll just do, you see how this is nice and shiny? That was because we tempered the chocolate in the microwave. All right, so our cake is now cooled and in its tin. Our chocolate stars have hardened. We peeled them carefully off of the wax paper. And now...
So now we're ready to bury the treasure in the cake. So we have 3 chocolate coins here, and we're gonna make 3 slits in the cake, and we're gonna tuck those deep inside for our tasting later.
It's important to go ahead and do this before you've turned out the cake because the ultimate destination is going to be on the cake plate and it's going to be face down. So you need to do this all before you're ready to turn it out. Would you like to bury?
I will.
And again, you want your cake to be nice and cool because we are putting chocolate in here and you want it to hold its shape and not melt. We're putting 3 chocolate coins in to represent the 3 wise men, but really you can do whatever your fancy is here. If this is a baby, or maybe just one coin, however you want to do it. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna take our cake plate here, put it flat on top of this cake. We've let it cool completely, and hopefully this will turn right out for us with a little bit of...
Ta-da! Okay.
All
Look
right.
at that.
So-
Does it look like a king's crown? I think it needs some stars. So, now,
We've had these already cooled and ready. We just have a variety of white and dark chocolate stars, and you can just line those up at the bottom to have a little bit of festive decoration.
okay, and now our Epiphany cake is ready to serve.
We'll cut into it later and see who gets to be the Epiphany king. All right, we have our prepared king's cake, and now we're about to cut it and serve it. The people who receive the hidden treasures of the chocolate coins are said to be king or queen for the day.
Redeeming love for
Everybody dig in.
is our Lord in heaven.
I have a coin.
Do you have a chocolate coin in there? Oh my goodness, look at Jacob's plate. Oh my goodness. And Mom, do you have any coins?
I did all the work,
You did all
and
the
I
work.
got no coin.
And there appears to be no coin, but
All the glory.
let's check and make sure that the third coin is not in here. No, I got nothing. But I'm married to a king, so I get something.
Merry Christmas
and happy Epiphany.